I'm Dr. Joseph Heiter. Retired but still very well known as the leading surgeon in separating Siamese twins.
Well, I became acquainted with a walrus when I was lost at sea.
Shut the front door. You were lost at sea?
Yes.
Who are you, Rudyard fucking Kipling?
Welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we journey through the many subgenres of science fiction on screen. I'm James.
And I'm Matt. This series, we have been exploring the sci-fi subgenre of mad science, and in today's episode, we will be looking at some grisly body horror kidnapping mad scientists. That content warning right now, listeners. We're talking about the Human Centipede first sequence from 2009 and Tusk from 2014.
Yes, and I've just had my dinner, so I've let that digest.
We didn't think this through, James.
I knew this was going to happen. I knew I should have come into this episode with an empty stomach because, like you said, it's going to be some grisly talk in this, some disgusting things which we're going to cover in today's episode. So if that doesn't perk your ears up, I don't know what will, listeners.
Yeah, you all know what the Human Centipede is, everybody. You know what you're getting into. Here be monsters.
Yes, and if you don't know much about Tusk, get ready to dive into that as well, because that's another crazy body horror, science abduction thing going on there, which we'll get into in today's episode. But I think this is quite an interesting pairing for us in terms of the mad science, because this is all about, it's kind of got like a little bit of Frankenstein to it, a little bit of Cronenberg, a little bit of Reanimator, all of those kind of things coming together, but also in kind of this 2000s era, which is coming off the back of what they started calling like torture porn and all that kind of stuff, and especially with the Human Centipede, all of those kind of really grisly films that were coming out. But we'll get into that when we start covering them in today's episode.
Well, let's get our heads and our faces and our mouths stuck into the first film that we're talking about today, the Human Centipede first sequence from 2009.
Oh, lovely.
One of my Rottweilers also tried to escape. Just before the operation, after position, the healing pains are twice as intense. Swallow it, bitch! Feed her!
This is a real Tommy Wiseau production, isn't it? Directed by, written by, produced by, edited by. All the names. Also,
yeah.
I assume his Tom Six and his wife. There's an Ilona Six in the mix as well.
I think it's his sixter, is what I was saying there.
Fair enough.
His sister,
okay.
Yeah. So it's a family affair.
Lovely.
Yeah, what a strange family. And also, is Six their real last name?
Well, he's Dutch. I thought it might be like a pseudonym, but he's Dutch, and I have no idea what's like a common what common surnames are. So yeah, maybe that is his real name. I'm not sure, but he's a mysterious figure, isn't he? Certainly most famous for this and its two sequels, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a legacy to have in terms of cinema, the Human Centipede.
Well, you say that with a bit of tone in your voice, but I think almost certainly
a legacy.
It is a legacy, and I would hazard a guess that it's a legacy that Tom Six is incredibly proud of, because say what you will about this film, it's clearly a subject and a film series that he's passionate about, and he's got it done, right? So yeah, yes, it is his legacy, and some people might take a dim view of that, but I expect Tom Six is very proud of that fact.
Yeah, every time you were saying legacy, I was like, I've got to come back with a joke about legs and legacy, but I just don't have it in me, Matt.
We'll get
got
there.
one?
We'll get there.
No,
later.
We'll get there. Yeah, we'll think about it. But this is coming out in 2009. Do you remember when this came out? Because I remember there being such a buzz around this film, to the point where I legally downloaded it with my mates, and we watched it, but I think we found it so B-movie-ish that we kind of fast-forwarded to the bits with the Human Centipede.
Oh, really? Oh, no patience for Dr. Joseph Heiter and his the kidnappings and all of that at the start.
Not 2009 me, no.
I was the same, except I wasn't fast forwarding through it. I was the same. Massive hype around this film, incredibly well marketed. Well, marketed well for exposure, but I wonder how many of the viewings were legitimate, paid for viewings. I think this was being, passed around, downloaded a lot, and not exactly like selling a lot of copies, or I don't even know if it had like a cinematic release. But yeah, I mean, it didn't make its budget back, and it was a very small movie, but a hell of a lot of people have seen this film, and it does not account for its sort of revenue takings.
No, but like you say, it's infamous, isn't it? People know about this film. People know what the premise is. The premise of there being this creation of the human centipede and how that works with all of the different subjects being sewed together. So it's got this really kind of sensational ad hype around it as well, hasn't it? Because people want to see this, and there's like a sick fascination with this concept, isn't there? Because it's coming in the era of that kind of torture porn film that was which were coming out around the 2000s, stuff like Hostel in 2005, stuff like Saw, films where people are abducted and grotesque things are happening to them, all this kind of like, literal torture in these films.
Yeah, very, very miserable, grim kind of era of horror movies that, to be honest, I don't think have aged very well. I like Saw was probably the high watermark of that era, wasn't it? And I absolutely loved Saw when it came out, and I remember really liking some of the sequels. And I've been trying to work my way through the Saw movies, and they're really bad. Like, it's not the violence or anything. I mean, they, like, some of them are just really badly made. They're like the editing, rapid editing, just to make it feel even more extreme than it even is. It's just kind of crazy. And this is, what do you think? This is kind of at the end of that cultural moment. Human Centipede comes out. Did this draw a line under it?
It feels like it might have done. I mean, I don't know enough about the sort of the film legacy of torture porn to properly comment on that, but it does feel in my mind this was kind of the falling off of that stuff, because this had such a crazy premise, but I think the execution is kind of they're getting to a point where they're making more B-movie level stuff when it comes to this style of horror film, and all of it is kind of getting churned up in the social media of it all and making that big viral moment, trying to top something. So a film like this, which has become so infamous, is partly because of that social media that was around it as well, because people were seeking it out based on these kind of bits and pieces that they'd seen online, the kind of news stuff that had come out about it. It was like very sensationalized and hyped up. Yeah.
And like I said, great marketing campaigns that reached all of those people. The thing that I remember from the marketing was the famous line, 100% medically accurate, which is on the main poster of the film. And I was and still am a bit obsessed with that sentence. And actually watching it, to talk about it today, that was the single line that stuck in my head in every single scene of the film, because I was like, and I don't know why it stuck with me so much, but there's something about the line that I don't know if I'm a bit of a rube, but like it's such a specific thing to say that I assume that he had consulted with someone, and on reflection, I guess obviously he didn't. That's not the kind of film this is. Of course he didn't, but I kind of always had it in my head that someone must have been consulted and rubber stamp this in some way, and I guess that's foolish of me to think that. But every scene I was like, is this medically accurate? Can this happen? And I don't think any of it is at all.
I mean, there's all these rumors, aren't there, about how he sort of got the medically accurate stuff confirmed. Stuff like he talked to a Dutch surgeon about it and did all this research and was discussing all the sort of logistics of actually doing this stuff, like having the IV to supplement their food supply and stuff at points, and then sort of getting into the food elements of it. All of this kind of stuff that he's looked into, supposedly.
The knee ligament thing does sort of suggest that someone's been consulted on that, because I just don't think you would think of that if you're thinking of a sort of despicable horror concept. You wouldn't dwell too much on the movement of the knee and how important that might be in sort of restricting your prisoners. But it goes like the Heiter goes into quite a lot of detail describing it as part of his plan when he's unveiling it all, that cutting a certain knee ligament to stop them from extending their knees is important to it. So that felt pretty legit. But I don't know. Overall, it's kind of bonkers, isn't it?
I mean, if we're getting into the sort of scientific nature of it, how does the centipede work then? So you mentioned there about the fact that Dr. Heiter takes off their knees and their ligaments. Does he take off their knees? He makes it so they can't
He's cutting
walk.
a ligament inside the knee. I'm sorry not to dwell on this, but I really don't understand the cutting the ligament in the knee thing, because once you're stitched together mouth to ass, you ain't standing up anyway. So what does it matter?
Maybe it's so maybe they could stand up if they all work together as a team, as a centipede team.
Right. Okay.
To escape.
It's about limiting movement, isn't it? What is now this is actually quite a difficult question, James. What is Dr. Joseph Heiter's goal in this movie?
He starts the way we're introduced to him is really weird just to start with. And one of the things I wanted to bring up with you. So when you first see the Doctor, he's in a car looking at this photo of some dogs lined up. It looks like they're just lined up, and you're like, this is weird. And he looks at one picture of one dog, and then he has another picture of 3 dogs, and then he goes and tranquilizes some guy. So even that intro to the Doctor at the start is weird.
Yep.
I mean, this whole film is weird. It's sort of superfluous to say that. But then it goes into the fact that he's so obsessed with conjoined twins. And that's kind of the reason he's doing this, because he's gone from being a surgeon who separates conjoined twins to being someone obsessed with the idea of conjoining things. So conjoining his pets, his Rottweilers, hence the pictures that we see earlier on.
Yeah.
These weird pictures. And then to the point where he's like, okay, I want to do this with human beings. I've worked it out. I've been thinking about how to do it, how to conjoin people. I don't just want conjoined twins. I want 3 of them. And then maybe I'll make 4 of them. And then who knows where I'm going to go. So he's obsessed with this idea of joining people together to create it's a new creation for him, isn't it? That's his scientific reasoning behind it.
Yeah, probably. That's interesting. It's a new creation. So then we get into the kind of the Frankenstein mode of mad scientist, and obviously that's the kind of way that we would think about it so many episodes deep into our mad science series. But just as presented in the film, I don't know, I'm just not so convinced that is clearly what Dr. Heiter wants. And I think that's projecting a little of the sort of mad scientist expectations onto him as a character, whereas it doesn't quite make sense, like wanting to create, we understand his background as separating Siamese twins, that it doesn't then follow that you would want to figure out how to conjoin people. It's antithetical to your life's work. And then add on top of all of that what he actually does once the centipede is made, which is then more about the dogs than the humans or the nature of the centipede. He wants to train them, and he wants them to be obedient and fetch his newspaper and stuff like that. So his goals are weird and ill-explained, I think.
It's not the kind of traditional mad scientist that we've seen who wants to make a big breakthrough to show the world. There are moments when you think, oh, he's doing this to prove to the world that he can do it. But it's also quite insular, isn't it? Because he's just doing it for his own satisfaction, and to just to have done it, to be the person who's done it. And we see this a lot just with the concept of a mad scientist anyway, that the kind of hubris which is driving their scientific discoveries, all that kind of stuff. But there is something just even madder than your average mad scientist in this. The fact that he's got this, like, he's a sick puppy, isn't he? He's got some issues.
Yeah.
The fact that he wants to just create this thing out of human beings, but he also wants it to obey him. And he wants to, like, mentally shape this human centipede as well. He wants it to be like one of his pets, be like 3 of his pets that he's sewn together. And he wants that kind of ownership over it. So again, it's that kind of God complex that he's got, which we see so many times.
He definitely has the recognizable God complex of a mad scientist. I mean, he's definitely a mad scientist, but the thing about it being such an insular, private thing for him, that's where he diverges from the mold. Because I don't think there's anything in the film that makes it seem like he does want to share this with the world. That's what I wonder about. I think it is quite private, and then it kind of, it diverges away from the archetype of mad scientist, because he's not. Yeah, he's definitely proud of what he's achieved, but the God complex doesn't extend to wanting everyone to see what he's done. It's quite a private thing, and then it becomes like more like a sort of fetish thing, where it's something private that he wants to keep at home, all for himself. And he's got this whole. He's got a dungeon, hasn't he, is what he's got, with a laboratory and all of that. It's great mad science stuff, but the way that he doesn't need an audience other than the centipede, I suppose. But his relationship with the centipede is, I don't know, not they're not the audience, they are like a pet.
And the idea of like that transformation that we see in this with the human centipede being created, this is the kind of scientific experimentation that has been done to unwilling hosts. So these people which are part of this experiment didn't sign up to be part of this experiment. It's not like that experiment where they all agreed and they would all get paid, or one of those ones where a mad scientist experimented on themselves because they can't get any subjects. He's finding subjects by force, and he's using them for his experiments just because he can, and he's got that kind of power to do that. And then the transformation itself it's quite harrowing. It's a really harrowing one, because they don't sign up for this, like I've said, and then they wake up and they have been abducted. They're the victims of an abduction, and you can imagine, like, that's where you get into the real horror elements of this as well, don't you? The fact that these guys have been abducted, these 2 girls and this man, and they wake up and they're tourists as well. They're on holiday, which is even worse for them. Like, they're supposed to be having a nice time.
Yeah, it's gone pretty badly wrong for these 3 people. Yeah, the transformation scene's really interesting, isn't it? Because for all of the extreme graphic horror in the film throughout, the transformation scene is surprisingly subtle. It's done, there's quite a lot of montage, focus on him being exhausted and the work that's going into it and all of that. And there is still some quite graphic close-ups of surgery, but there's something about the way it's done in such close-up that I think obscures the horror of it, makes it quite medical, because you just sort of see like a cutting of skin, and a flap and stuff like that. So it doesn't look like it's happening. Yeah. But they don't even really look like arse cheeks. It's sort of extreme close-up. It just looks like flesh in the extreme.
Yeah, it made me properly cringe, though.
Really?
I really struggled with it for whatever reason. I was just, because when they just properly show that kind of close-up of him with the scalpel cutting into their flesh and making that flap, that he's going to use that flap to attach them arse to mouth. They're just, because I think it's the anticipation of this. The whole thing is the anticipation of what's happening, and when he's taking the teeth out as well.
That was horrible. That was extremely horrible. Yeah. That was, maybe I'm Maybe I'm giving it too much credit for how subtle it was then during that sequence. But there was something about the kind of the montage of it and the use of close-ups that compared to, extended sequences of pain and agony in the second half of the movie later on after the transformation, I just thought was quite interesting and one of the more kind of artistic moments in the film that did harken back to Frankenstein-y birth scenes and stuff like that.
I think it's all those sound effects as well during those scenes of the sort of the surgery, that kind of like the sound of the cutting into flesh and things like that. I think the soundscaping sort of freaked me out as well and added an extra layer to it. But then also there's like soundscaping in the actual bodily functions of the centipede as well. And those moments where, the poo train's going to be off soon.
Oh my God.
So you just like all of those like burps and stomach grumbles, and where it's going when the head of the centipede starts eating. It really does turn your stomach to watch.
Yeah, it's horrible. There were fewer scenes of that than I remembered, because obviously this is a gimmick movie, and you are putting it on in 2009 because you know that three people are going to get stitched together ass to mouth and eat shit, literally. But it actually doesn't happen that often. I think it definitely happens once. There's a main scene where it happens for the first time, and Heiter is absolutely reveling in it, dancing around and having the time of his life with it. But then I think it may happen one more time, but that's about it. I in my memory, there was a lot more of that happening. Possibly I'm thinking of the South Park parody of this, where it's 20 minutes of this. But there was a lot less of that than I thought, which is, I don't know, just quite interesting in how impactful of a concept it is and how well delivered it is, how effectively it delivers the premise and achieves what it's trying to do, which is make you think about the thing that's obviously been stuck in Tom Six's head for quite some time before making the movie.
But you don't like... He doesn't show you any of it happening, thank God. But also the fact that you don't see like the stitching. It's all hidden by bandages and things like that throughout. So it's kind of creating the illusion of these people being stitched together through a lot. You do see like a few little stitch marks and things like that.
Mm. Well, you do on the poor third section girl with her sepsis cheeks. You see a lot of her situation.
They've got that, but again, it's like the hiding of it. So even with the knees as well, they've got the bandages around the knees. So you can see where all the surgeries happened. But there is that thing about withholding some of that imagery, which is quite affecting in this as well. Although sometimes I'm a bit like, well, I know it's because it's cheap. So they weren't able to afford to do all these special effects with it.
Yes, yeah, it's extremely low budget film. But yeah, they do a really good job of putting the really graphic stuff in your head without needing to put quite all of it on screen, which is actually quite an impressive feat, I think, and quite well done for the kind of limitations of it. How seriously do you take the horror? You were saying you were like really cringing. I do remember when I first saw it, I thought that it was kind of the ludicrousness of it cut through the horror of it. And I didn't totally feel that way now because I've become more delicate and squeamish in my old age. How did you find that horror, the horror of it versus the ludicrousness of it?
I think it has that kind of touch of ridiculousness and satire to it, which I think I've always kind of seen, but I kind of put it down to the more B-movie nature of the film. And looking at it this time, I think there are moments which are just so off the wall that I couldn't take them seriously. But you're right, it's still weird because it's like it's both of those tones, isn't it? Because it's got those B-movie elements, but it's not properly going into them. It's more like a Tommy Wiseau. You feel like everybody's giving a performance, like a serious performance in this, but when it comes down to what's actually happening, and just how off the wall and crazy this entire premise of the film is, I think it's kind of battling both those things. And I remember reading about Tom Six had to hide from investors the whole premise of the film initially. He was saying like, oh, and there's some sort of like stitching of body parts or something like that. He never went into detail about how the Human Centipede worked. And it was the same when he was auditioning people to be in this, because lots of actresses took one look at that in the script and were like, absolutely not, I'm not doing it. Until he found Winter Williams and Aisling Yenny, and they were like, okay, we'll give it a go, sure.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Akihiro Kitamura, who's like the front of the Centipede as well, playing Katsuro. I think also it's a interesting sort of mix of people from different countries as well in this.
Yes,
So
it's
you've
a
got-
really international movie, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I watched this on Amazon Prime, and it did not have subtitles, so I lost like
Oh, you didn't have
massive
any
sections.
subtitles for the
no
whole film?
subtitles. So I was just all going off raw emotion for the storyline of this, especially when the two detectives turn
Yeah,
up
there's
towards
like
the
a
end.
10-minute sequence where they're talking to each other.
Yeah, and Katsuro has this big speech at one point before he
Yeah.
commits suicide.
Yeah, that's really
and
good.
didn't get any of that meaning. I was
He's,
just like, he's had enough. He's had enough. He's done.
That's really good, and really good for the kind of mad scientist getting his. No, it's not really a comeuppance, I suppose, but getting called out on his bullshit, because he's yelling at him. He's addressing him as God, and he's saying that he's just an insect. I've lived my life like an insect. I'm not worthy of living, but still, fuck you, God. You're not God. It's a good little speech, a really good performance from him, I thought. But yeah, like very international film. We've got the Dieter Laser, the German guy playing Joseph Heiter. He's absolutely horrible. I think it's a very good performance from him. You've got Americans, you've got a Japanese guy. Director obviously is Dutch. So yeah, it's all over the place, which is really interesting and quite a fun element of the film, I think.
I think it's kind of hard to place it as well, because I know it's set in Germany, but I think that kind of adds to the kind of uncanny nature of it, that all of these people from different places are finding themselves embroiled in this crazy scientific experiment.
Do you think this holds up as a mad scientist story? Where do you see Heiter in the kind of canon of mad scientists?
I think he's definitely one which will remain in the kind of the legacy of mad science, because he's borrowing from a lot of tropes of the traditional mad scientist, and it's quite obvious the kind of Nazi comparisons that we've got here as well happening, like the Nazi experimentation nature of it. And I think Tom Six has said that he took inspiration from that, or he took some of the concepts around sort of like those terrible Nazi experiments that happened, which we talked about during our Boys from Brazil episode. We went into more detail about that kind of stuff. And I think they kind of created a kind of stereotypical mad scientist, but I think he's not going to be as like revered as these other mad scientists, but I think he's a very interesting example of what happens in that period in time to mad science in the 2000s, where it's about this kind of the abduction of people and leaning into that sort of torture porn element and all of that kind of stuff, and kind of a fear around medical doctors, maybe.
A fear around traveling that was definitely like prevalent in this sort
that
of
as well.
period of time in horror movies.
Hostel.
Yeah, Hostel I was thinking of for sure. I think it's a really good performance of a mad scientist, and it's interesting to see the mad scientist as viewed through the torture porn lens. I don't think he's a very interesting scientist, because I just can't get my head around what the nature of his experiment is and what he wants out of it. And I think it is just in the same way that any kind of torture porn villain operates, is they're getting off on doing something awful to somebody else. That's what it is. But that doesn't match up well with other mad scientists that we've seen, I don't think, really. But it is that torture porn lens on that type of character. And then you have Dieter Laser, who I think is honestly giving a brilliant mad scientist performance, and he could have done that in a less torture porny film. See him going up against Jeffrey Combs in a Reanimator film. They'd have been a brilliant pairing there in a sort of more campy, cheesy movie. That would have been good fun. Whereas it's just obviously horrible in this film.
It's that cold clinical edge that it all has, which kind of takes away some of the fun that we've seen in other mad science. Because if you go back to Jeffrey Combs, he's working in a mortuary, but then also his home is a funeral home in the second one, and things like that. And there's just more, I don't know, they go back to the kind of Frankenstein of it all, where you've got this like gothic looking lab and all of that kind of thing, and the romantic nature around that kind of image. And then with this, you've got the cold medical cleanliness of it, even though it's not a very clean film. All of those kind of things going up against each other. So it's an interesting example, but it kind of takes away from like the fun of mad science in place of something truly disgusting.
So you don't find this film fun then?
I did not find it fun.
I think I did find it fun the first time I watched it. Just going back to that kind of thing about the ludicrousness of it. Yeah, I think that when I was younger, I just thought it was so silly that was my main takeaway from it, and I sort of found the humour in it, and I really didn't this time. Sometimes I've watched all sorts of really extreme, over the top horror films back in the day, and I think when they are extremely over the top, that kind of took me out of the horror of it a bit. But I guess I just feel a little bit differently now, and I didn't sort of see it that way. And then it makes me wonder how I would feel about the sequel if I rewatch that. Have you seen the sequel to this?
No, I've not seen any of the sequels.
I haven't seen the third one. The third one looks like it swings back even further towards campiness, so that might be quite fun. But the second one is utterly horrific, really, really horrible, really extreme, violent, grisly. But again, I remember watching that and being just almost impressed with how he had managed to swing so far from what I thought was a very campy horror in the first one to something utterly extreme. And I think he was deliberately trying to do that. There's a deliberate attempt on Tom Six's part to make the second one totally extreme. He had to make edits for the BBFC because certain things were just completely unacceptable. And I was impressed that like he had been able to swing the needle so far from this first one to the second one. But I don't know, I wonder now, if I'm not even finding joy in the first one, I don't know if I'd be able to stomach the second one again.
But it gets very meta as well, and I think that kind of takes it back into this social media age of it as well, because the second one, doesn't it reference the first one?
The second one like takes place in a world where the first one is a movie, and the main character in the second one has watched the film The Human Centipede and is trying to recreate it in quote unquote the real world.
And then I think the third one, both of the other films exist in this world.
Oh, do they? Okay.
They are trying to instigate this in a prison.
Yes, they're trying to do the full job, the full centipede job.
And I think I read that Tom Six envisions this as something you could watch back to back as one complete film, like a Centipede. It feels again like just marketing talk to be like, why don't you watch all three of my films back to back?
Yeah,
and give me some money for it. But it kind of, that idea that he's been like, okay, yeah, you can watch them all and they're kind of interlinking. But the interlinking thing might just be that the first film is referenced in the second film, and the second film and the third film references the second and the first. Centipede. Yeah, what a lovely time that would be. I'd love to spend 5 hours just watching three of these movies back to back. I can't think of anything better to do with my time. Yes, The many legs of the legacy of the Human Centipede. I still don't have the
you got
joke
there.
at.
You sort of got there.
Kind of.
Do you want to edit one in later if you think of one overnight?
Yeah, this might just be a gap. But yeah, as I don't have a joke to segue us into the next film, shall we just go for it, Matt?
Yeah, let's get our teeth stuck into the next one.
Oh, nice. Get our Tusk stuck into it.
Yeah, okay. Hi listeners, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us and get access to hundreds of hours of bonus episodes, you can sign up to our Patreon.
We've got discussions on all the latest sci-fi films in cinemas, the Bad Movie Bunker, and Patrons Picks, as well as mini-series covering your favourite franchises.
Patrons get to have their say on what we cover, both over on Patreon and right here on the main show too.
So if you want to join, head over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Now, back to the episode.
Ahoy, matey! You know, it occurs to me that if you are to fulfill your destiny, if you are to be a true walrus, well, Mr. Tusk, a walrus must learn to swim.
So Tusk from 2014. This isn't Kevin Smith's first foray into a horror movie. This is Kevin Smith swinging back a little bit to comedy, having dipped into he kind of left his View Askew universe. Is that how you say it? He kind of left that behind a little bit a few years before this. And he did Red State, which was really straight-faced from what I remember, like no humour whatsoever in that. And I think he made Cop Out as well, which obviously is a comedy, but sort of separate from his little universe. And now this was him swinging back to like somewhere in the middle. So finding his unique sense of humor again, while also continuing to go down this exploration of horror.
And this comes out in 2014. So podcasts are definitely a thing at this point. And this is very self-referential when it comes to podcasting. And we have to talk about it. We are a podcast. The idea itself came from Kevin Smith's own podcast, from an episode called The Walrus and the Carpenter, where they were talking about this bizarre lodging offer story that they'd come across. And then they kind of went down this rabbit hole of what could have happened and all this kind of stuff. And then that's where the initial premise for the film came from. And then Kevin Smith went onto Twitter, basically said to the Twitterverse, shall I make this film about some guy who's trying to turn this unsuspecting victim into a walrus? So all of that is such an interesting way to come up with the premise. So this idea has come from Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier just riffing on their podcast, and then it's all spun out from there.
It sort of does have the feeling of like you're watching an in-joke extended out to an hour and a half. Not necessarily a bad thing, but knowing enough about Kevin Smith to know like the kind of person he is, his sense of humor, and the way that he's cultivated his career, I suppose more importantly, a small number of very dedicated fans keeping his career going basically for a long time. Knowing that, this one definitely felt like stepping into an in-joke, and not in the way that like you can put on a Jay and Silent Bob film and you know there will be some in-jokes there, but, you know, overall it'll be a sort of broad comedy that you can enjoy. But this was more like, okay, someone's having a laugh about the idea of this walrus thing. And then that, I don't know, made it a bit awkward, I think, to watch, because I was always a little bit on the back foot tonally throughout the whole film. Like, am I laughing or am I scared, basically? You know, wasn't totally sure.
I quite liked that, though, the fact that I felt a bit of both when I was watching this.
Yeah.
I think it's also that kind of, it's not, disgust is the wrong word, but that kind of uncomfortableness you feel about the protagonist as well. The protagonist, played by Justin Long, Wallace, who is basically an unlikable guy.
Yeah.
And he does this podcast with his mate, Haley Joel Osment, who's playing Teddy. And they just have really irreverent conversations on this podcast that they're putting together. And they're poking fun at people. And that's the whole joke, is they're being quite mean.
Mm-hmm.
And Wallace in particular just comes off as an arsehole. And I think that uncomfortable thing about wanting him to get his comeuppance, but then seeing that comeuppance come around and then sort of fighting between thinking of him as this kind of horrible person, but then also they make references to him being a good person at one point. And actually this is all like a front. He's not really like this. This is a persona he's created. So it gets quite in depth in terms of all that kind of stuff. But on the surface, it's just this kind of weird story about this podcaster who ends up being abducted and basically turned into a walrus.
Yeah, that's the plot, isn't it?
Yeah.
But he is, yeah, you're right. He's a piece of shit. I would just say credit to Justin Long, who is 100% in this character in every scene and throughout everything that happens to him. It doesn't matter how much of an unlikable asshole the character is, or however much of an insane situation he is placed in. Justin Long is totally convincing in every scene. I don't know, I've never really I don't dislike Justin Long, I've just never really thought about him really as an actor, and this is a weird film to sort of credit a brilliant performance in, but like he's really compelling, and he's 100% in that character in every scene. It's remarkable to watch, you know, covered in fake walrus prosthesis, but giving it everything he's got for this, let's be honest, kind of silly movie.
It's true, but I think all of that, like, it is silly, and all that kind of metatextual stuff that's happening with it being based on a podcast, it's featuring a podcast in it, and then going into what actually happens in the plot itself, I think it's quite an interesting journey you go on when you're watching this film. And I'd seen pictures of the sort of the walrus transformation prior to watching this, and I knew it was a big part of the film. So I was really interested to see how we would get there. And I think I didn't expect it to be as, because it's a Kevin Smith film, so there is comedy in there, and there is sort of outlandish stuff that happens right from the offset when they're watching that video of the Kill Bill kid who accidentally chops off his leg. Like, all of these ridiculous things happen. But I think the scenario that Wallace finds himself in is very similar to the scenario in Human Centipede, but the mad scientist that we've got in this is a different kind of mad scientist. He's kind of cobbling together this creation that he wants to make.
Yeah, it is a similar scenario, but we feel so much less sympathy for Wallace. There is some, like you said, like there's these flashbacks where he sees quite nice, but he's obviously built up as a total bastard. And it's just interesting that this is only 5 years after the Human Centipede. But if we were suggesting that the Human Centipede felt like the tail end of torture porn, there is a different approach to the protagonist and the extent to which he deserves it, or if not deserves it, but we don't mind so much that, you know, it's less torture, and he's built up as a real piece of shit who deserves something bad happening to him, not just some innocent victims whose cars have broken down and are then tortured by a maniac. So it's just interesting to kind of move away from that more pure torture of the characters in the Human Centipede.
Because also I think it's the way that Kevin Smith is making you think about him as well, because you are shown all the terrible things he's done, but then at the same time you kind of don't know whether to believe that's actually him. At least I found myself doing that when I was watching it, because they say that he's a big womanizer and all these kind of things, and the way he talks about that to his friend is kind of saying all of that. But you don't actually see him be any of these things.
Yeah.
You don't see him get with all of these ladies and stuff and cheat on his girlfriends. So is that part of his persona he's creating on this podcast with his friend, or is that real?
And he talks openly about the creation of a persona as well. He talks about that and how he's a stand-up comedian. He's a failed stand-up comedian, right? Who's found success in this podcast. And
like me, just based on today's jokes.
And he talks with her about how he sort of has to put on this front. So yeah, you're right. I think there is credence to that, isn't there? He talks about sleeping around on the road, but we don't see any of that happen, and he's actually very tender with his girlfriend in those scenes. Yeah, it's all that stuff is very interesting and a very different approach to, for example, Human Centipede, to its characters.
And then Wallace meets Howard. So how do you feel about Howard as our kind of mad scientist character, and how well does he kind of fit into that mold?
I think he's very similar to Joseph Heiter, except I think I know a bit more about why he wants to do what he wants to do. He's certainly mad, I can't relate, but he's got arrested development, right? He's stuck in this place and time, this incredible thing that happened to him in this interaction that he had with a walrus that's just haunted his life forevermore, and he just wants to go back to that and kind of find resolution. There's, this is all like very recognizable character tropes, and it's led him down this path of mad science, but he hasn't arrived at this path scientifically. He's not a mad scientist in that kind of stereotypical way. Like we've talked about the difference between a mad scientist and somebody who is doing mad science, an amateur, and that's what Howard is. But he's very capable, he's very proficient, but he's not doing it for the science. He's doing it for emotional reasons that only he can fully understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because he goes into his traumatic childhood, doesn't he? He tells us about that, and he weaves all of these really intricate stories about his life at sea and what he was doing, the people that he met there, and then, like you say, the big walrus story where he was washed up on an island, befriends a walrus, and then later on, towards the end of the film, we find out that he ended up eating that walrus who he'd befriended to survive just as the ship arrived. So again, it's got that comedy element to it because it's all very satirical and tongue-in-cheek. The entire story of this. I mean, you've got Johnny Depp turning up as a detective character who is just utterly ridiculous. So all of it is just the comedy angle that Kevin Smith gives to it is there. But then you do still kind of, I think that maybe adds to the madness of it because it is like it's laugh out loud ridiculousness at points. And I think that's kind of leaning into the feeling of the mad science, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's the thing. Like it just treads a weird line between horror and comedy, and it's not. It doesn't feel like a horror comedy, because it's almost like it doesn't know which of those things it is at its heart. Because it mostly plays like straight-faced horror, but a bit like how I felt about the Human Centipede the first time I saw it. That it is so ludicrous that you can never fully take it seriously. Even with Justin Long acting his little heart out to be a convincing walrus prisoner man, even with him doing that brilliant job, it's still like, well, but he is, he's wearing a walrus suit. This is kind of stupid, silly. So I didn't know where to land with that, I suppose.
But he's still transformed, isn't he?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
The transformation's another interesting one to look at because it starts off slowly, doesn't it? He just loses a leg to begin with, and then he has his teeth taken out, and what else happens to him? He has his tongue taken out as well.
He has his tongue taken out, and he's still got his teeth, I think, actually, but he has holes, in like above his mouth or in the top of his mouth or something so that the tusks can be inserted. And then the rest of it I actually don't really know because Howard describes it as a suit that he's been making, but then once you actually see the transformation happen, it's it's more than a suit, isn't it? Because Wallace's face is part of it, I think, because his eyes blend perfectly into the walrus suit. So it's not just something that he's wearing over him. And, you know, he seemingly can't be brought back from this at the end of the film. So I don't quite actually know what's really happened to Wallace in the transformation. Obviously, a lot of it is psychological, isn't it?
Well, he also loses his other limbs by the end of it, doesn't he? So I think he's sewn into that suit, which Howard's made. And then because of he can't really control his body, can he? Well, he can control his body, but he can't move other than like a walrus now because he's been like sewn in, and that hence why he's moving around like that. But all of that kind of transformation happens mentally to him afterwards, doesn't it? Because he starts off and he's just a tortured man who has been sewn into this walrus suit, or his body has been transformed, but then it's all the stuff that Howard does to him to try and make him mentally become a walrus, which is when it gets even more disturbing. And again, comparing it to Human Centipede, where they're trying, like, the doctor in that is trying to turn the victims into like a pet and make them obedient. Howard's doing a similar kind of thing, but he really wants Wallace to become this walrus. He wants him to embody him mentally as well as physically.
Yeah, and he really does, doesn't he? He really gets there by the end of the film. Does lead to like kind of an amazing showdown between Wallace and Howard, doesn't it? The fight where Howard gets his own walrus get up and they kind of duke it out as two walruses. Like, I just can't believe that such a silly premise can be played out so seriously. It's incredibly well done, that final sequence.
Yeah, that battle that they have, and then when Howard emerges from the walrus suit and says, right, you've made it to the next stage, now you've got to defeat me as a man, just like the walrus that he remembers, Mr. Tusk. So all of that is just, you do really sort of get into those scenes. I found myself kind of willing Wallace on when that was happening.
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, absolutely. You're willing Wallace on the whole way. I think, again, comes down to Justin Long's performance. I'd also say, I mean, you've got to give it up for Michael Parks as well. Not really playing the mad scientist character. This is definitely I don't know, there's shared elements with mad scientist archetypes, but this is much more the eccentric, recluse millionaire behavior. This is the kind of archetype that Michael Parks is playing to, but he's also doing a brilliant job of it. And while I'm shouting out brilliant acting performances, I've got to say, hands down, maybe a career worst performance for Johnny Depp. Just worst thing about the film by far, I thought.
He's not even in the credits, is he?
Is he not? That's interesting. What, because it was, one of those, like, kept as a surprise from audiences?
Yeah, I think it's very, like, he's not listed on a lot of credits bits, but it's Johnny Depp. He's got his daughter a role as well.
Yeah.
Like Lily Rose Depp appears along with Kevin Smith's daughter. So you've got all the cameos coming in. But yeah, Johnny Depp's performance is weird. It
is very weird, and it's actually really unfortunate. And I wonder if, because I got the sense that how was all of this directed in terms of the acting? Because it's a ridiculous premise. Everyone on set knows it's a ridiculous premise. But I assume the direction that Michael Parks and Justin Long have been given is, this movie is ridiculous, but I want you to treat it seriously. And they do. And they give very good performances for that. And I just wonder if Kevin Smith doesn't have the kind of cachet on set to tell Johnny Depp to do that, and Johnny Depp will show up and do whatever he wants and recognize that it's a ridiculous movie and give a ridiculous performance. And if Johnny Depp could have given this a serious performance that he is capable of doing, he also could have given a brilliant performance like Parks and Long do. But I just think it's really unfortunate. I think Johnny Depp drags this into comedy, just
Yeah.
total comedy for quite a big chunk of the second half of the film. And I think that's to its detriment. And I think that was a real shame, especially because Long and Parks are both brilliant in this.
Yeah, because I think it becomes more of a joke about Canada as well, and French Canadians, which kind of just goes on for too long.
Yeah. Jokes about poutine and poutine weenie, and They did a bit of that in the start with the border crossing, and it's appropriate because the tone hasn't, the really awful stuff hasn't happened yet. But once we're into the walrus of it all, I don't think we should have been having the French Canadian accent from Johnny Depp quite so much anyway. Yeah,
it kind of distracts from the other stuff that's going on in the film. But the fact that Johnny Depp is a detective trying to track down this serial killer who is doing this weird experiment, this transformation of turning people into, he doesn't know what he's turning them into. He just suspects something weird's going on because of the way these bodies have been left. But there is something as well in the fact that Howard is doing this again and again and again, and he's trying to refine his experiment so that he can actually create Mr. Tusk. So he's trying to mentally turn a human being into this idea of this walrus that he met on this island. And there's something just really interesting about that concept in the film as well. Just how he's trying to control someone's mind through this manipulation as well as their body.
Yeah, he thinks that he can achieve a full transformation in body and spirit and mind, but just through a physical transformation that he's got control of, and then conditioning. Basically, that's his premise, and he seems to succeed, I guess, with Wallace. I don't know if it is quite a success, but he certainly transforms Wallace into something other than Wallace. And he seems happy, in his final moments. Whether it's Mr. Tusk he's created or not, he certainly seems happy with his with the transformation that he's helmed. He's very pleased with himself
because Howard felt guilty that he'd killed Mr. Tusk, the original Mr. Tusk, and now he kind of feels like he's had his comeuppance by being killed by this new Mr. Tusk that he's created. But then we come to the ending of the film. What did you think about the way the film ended? Because it wasn't what I expected.
No, it wasn't what I expected either. But I mean, not least of all, why wasn't he taken to a doctor?
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to why I was asking about the nature of the walrus suit, because I assumed there was an element of just taking the man out of the suit.
Yeah.
But I guess, the point is it's the successful psychological transformation that Howard has enacted on Wallace. That's why that was what I took away from it. That's why he has to live in a wildlife sanctuary as opposed to some sort of medical institution for humans. Because I guess by walrus standards, maybe he's healthy. So that's the life that he lives. So it's a victory for Howard, I guess. That's the kind of ending of the film, we have a very successful mad scientist and leaving a great legacy of a human walrus hybrid behind him.
Yeah, he's created what he set out to do. And there is that moment at the end when Wallace is looking up at his girlfriend and his friend Teddy, and then his girlfriend says, "I still love you," or I love you. And you think he's going to cry. Does he cry? I can't remember.
So. I'm sure I saw a teardrop
it's like
roll
a
down
tear.
the tusk.
And then it flashes back to when he said, "Oh, he never cries," and that's part of it. And then so it's kind of that lingering question: is he still human in his mind, or has he fully just become this walrus?
Yeah, and is Ali's assessment of crying as being the thing that separates us from the animals, is that enough to undo Howard's success? Is he still a very, very damaged man, or is he a walrus? I think he probably is just a very, very damaged man, but does it matter? Given what Howard wanted out of it, he certainly seemed to get what he wanted, I suppose. Yeah,
he created his very own Mr. Tusk, and
got killed by him.
Yeah, and then Teddy got to go out with his girlfriend, so he's fine. I don't know what happened to their podcast afterwards.
No, it's going to need some retooling.
Yeah. But yeah. What a couple of strange films we have talked about in today's episode, Matt.
Yeah, weird movies, but definitely some mad science happening. And that's the nature of mad science, James. Sometimes it's going to get weird. We know that by now, if we've learned one thing from this series of the show. Yes. It's a weird series to be doing, Mad Science, but we will have more Mad Science for you very soon, listeners, so keep a lookout for that. In the meantime, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you can hear more episodes as soon as they drop into the feed. Please follow us on social media so you can find out more about what's coming up and hear from us on there, or you can visit our website, journeythroughsci-fi.com. And if you want a free and easy way to support the podcast, why not leave us a review and leave us a comment? It's a quick and easy way to help new listeners discover the show, and we really appreciate it. If you want to do more than review the show to support us and you want to get some bonus content, you can head on over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi, where you can find all of our bonus episodes, where we have absolutely dozens, hundreds of episodes over there. Yes, mini-series galore over on the Patreon channel. And next time here on the main feed in our Mad Science series, we'll be looking at another couple of weird films. So we're taking it from bodily transformations to ones of the mind as we look at Possessor from 2020 and Get Out from 2017. Sticking with the horror vibes towards the end of this Mad Science series. Yes, so keep a lookout for that. We'll be back with you very soon. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.